You said you studied journalism. So how did you become a social entrepreneur?
So my original plan was to be an investigative journalist. That was my dream ever since I was a child. But when I was in university, when I was in my second year university, my mom had lost her job. And I thought that I won't be able to finish school. But lucky for me, I was able to get a scholarship that allowed me to finish my education. And ever since then, I became very passionate about making sure I play a part in making education more accessible for other children in the Philippines. And that sort of sparked that desire to do good and to be part of social change. And that has what led me to the path that I am in now.
And you co-founded Mano Amiga Academy, a social enterprise school, when you were only 23 years old. So what inspired you at that age?
So after graduating from university, I knew I wanted to do something to give back. So I volunteered in Mexico and I was living there for a year. And when I was there, I was a volunteer in the public hospital and I was encouraging other youth volunteers from Mexico to join me. Now, one of the schools I visited was a Mano Amiga school. And when I was trying to get children to volunteer from that school, they told me that they couldn't afford the transportation cost of volunteering regularly. And I was so surprised. And when I spoke to the principal, I found out that a Mano Amiga school is a very good school for children who can't afford it. And when I learned more about the model, that is what inspired me to try to bring it to the Philippines because I felt that's something that we need. And so I was 23 at the time when I got a call from Mexico asking if I was interested in bringing the school model back. And so at 23, without any experience in education or in nonprofit, I decided to put it up. And as I mentioned earlier, if there's anything that really pushed me to pursue this, it's that my experience as a scholar. And even though I did not have any experience as an educator at the time, I was an experienced student. So I knew what a good education looked like. And I knew the kind of education that I want low-income students to have access to as well. So that was the inspiration behind Mano Amiga Philippines. We try to reflect on what makes a good education, what's nice to have versus what's necessary, and then try to introduce those innovations in being able to create a good education for the children and their families.
So tell us more about Mano Amiga Academy. How does the academy benefit the students, their parents, especially the mothers?
So Mano Amiga uses very experience-based approach when it comes to education. We do a lot of project-based learning, wherein instead of just the students sitting down in the classroom and listening to a lecture, our students actually are given problems to solve in the community. So they use what they learn in the classroom to solve actual problems in the community. So some of them have built their own solar panels, or some of them have created this campaign on hygiene and had introduced it to their own communities. But what's amazing about Mano Amiga, something we're very proud about, is that we don't just help the students, but we really help the family as a whole. For us, it's about creating this ecosystem that will enable or give the students an enabling environment for them to succeed. So apart from educating the students, we also provide livelihood to the mothers in the community. We put up a cafeteria and catering business wherein 100% of the employees are mothers, and 100% of the profits are donated back to the school to support the scholarship fund of their kids. Since then, Mano Amiga has continued to employ more of the parents in the community. So we have employed the parents as assistant teachers. We've employed them as part of our maintenance team. And again, the idea is we don't just uplift the life of one child. We really try to transform an entire community.
You have also co-founded a multimedia platform for women, She Talks Asia. Tell us about it.
So in 2017, we realized that we really need to create a platform that will put women at the center. We wanted to inspire other women to really try to break the glass ceiling or to aspire for something higher, for something bigger. So we decided to put up She Talks Asia, wherein we feature empowering narratives of different women, not just from the Philippines, but across the world, these women who are making a difference in their own fields. So it started as just us producing these stories, and then we also started producing on-ground conferences, wherein we put at the forefront issues that matter to women, whether it's how women need to step up or to speak up against sexual harassment, for example, or issues like equal pay for both men and women. We created these conferences as a safe space for us to have those discussions, and at the same time for the women to come home armed with more leadership skills in order to overcome the challenges that they're facing in their lives.
During the recent women leadership workshop organized by Journalists Association of Bhutan, which I also attended, you mentioned about two kinds of mindsets, fixed mindsets and growth mindset. Why is it important to recognize these mindsets in ourselves?
So this is based on a study done by Dr. Carol Dweck, right? And she did a study to understand whether the mindsets that we have can affect the likelihood of our success in life. And she identified two mindsets, as you had mentioned, the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. Fixed mindset refers to people who don't think they can change. Fixed mindset are people who believe that they're stuck with the intelligence and the talents that they're born with. So if there's something that they're not good at, for them, that's not something that they can ever be good at anymore. People with a fixed mindset are also very conscious about what other people think of them. They feel pressured to look smart or to look talented. So they try not to go out of their comfort zone wherein they feel that their lack of talent would be exposed. As opposed to people who with a fixed mind, with a growth mindset. People with a growth mindset believe that the talents that we're born with, yes, they're there, but it doesn't mean that you're just limited to that. People with a growth mindset are always looking for ways to learn and to develop new skills, knowledge. And the amazing thing about people with growth mindset is because since they know that you can always grow and you can always learn and you can always improve, they're very bold in seeking out new challenges. They're not afraid of failure. They believe that failure is just temporary. Mistakes are just temporary, and it's actually just a stepping stone for eventual success. I believe that it's important for us to be aware what kind of fixed mindset and growth mindset tendencies we have, because these narratives that we have in our minds could either push us towards success or hold us back, right? So if there are things that we feel scared about trying, or if again there's that voice in your head that's telling you can't do it or you're not good enough, then it's time to reframe that into a growth mindset, which is, okay, maybe I can't do it yet, but then if I work on it, if I invest time and practice and effort, then eventually I'll be able to accomplish what I set out to do.
What should be the mindset of an inspiring young leader to achieve their goals?
The mindset of an inspiring, well, of course, I will say growth mindset is very important, right? Because growth mindset, again, I think with growth mindset comes also humility or intellectual humility. I think that the worst thing or the worst mistake that a leader can do is to think that he or she, one, should be perfect and should be able to accomplish everything. Or second, that he or she has the answers to everything. Having a growth mindset makes you more humble because it makes you realize that, okay, I cannot be good at everything. Nobody can be, right? At the same time, I am also vulnerable to mistakes. Even if I'm a leader, I can also make mistakes. And by sticking to that intellectual humility, then even if you're a leader, you don't try to monopolize the solutions. You're open to feedback from the people around you. And at the same time, you also try to create this culture where people learn and support each other instead of judge each other or instead of castigating each other for their mistakes. I think also that as a young leader, a lot of us feel that, at least in my experience before, is that I don't have credibility because I was young, or that my lack of experience really is a setback. But I think something that has worked in my favor is that because, again, I don't have enough experience, then I was more open to seeking out people who are. I was really very active in terms of hearing out other people's advice, especially those who have been educators for a long time. I met with a lot of people who've been working in nonprofit for a long time. And because I was so open to learning, and I was so open to asking them, how do you think I can improve the school? How do you think I can improve the idea? Then it has given birth to the success of what Mano Amiga is today.
Women, especially Bhutanese women, I think most women in the world, we have this pressure to be perfect. And I remember that statement from the workshop, be brave over perfect. If you could highlight on that.
So a lot of studies have been showing that one thing that's really holding back women is this obsession with being perfect, the need to be perfect, the fear of failure. And the reason for that is that at an early age, women are socialized to be perfect. Boys are encouraged to climb trees. They're encouraged to play outside, whereas women are encouraged to behave a certain way. They're encouraged to make sure that their clothes are not messy. They're encouraged to fulfill certain chores in the home that we're not given, or that we don't expect from boys. And because of that, we hold on to that narrative that in order for us to be good enough, we have to be a certain way, and we have to be perfect. And as a result, we're losing out on opportunities. All over the world, most of the leaders are men. And yes, there's a bias because they're men, they tend to hire who they're comfortable with, which is their fellow men. But at the same time, studies have revealed that women are turning down opportunities, are not asking for opportunities, or are even saying that they're not good enough for those opportunities. And even if they're just as competent, just as smart, talented as men, as their male counterparts, they feel like they don't deserve those opportunities or that recognition. The mantra, be brave over being perfect, is very important because, again, we need to encourage women to really go after things that they want. We need to let go of the mindset that everything has to be in place or that we can't make mistakes before we can deserve an opportunity.
During your leadership talk, you also mentioned productive mistakes. What exactly is productive mistakes?
So I think one mistake also that leaders tend to do is that they create this very intimidating environment where people are afraid to make mistakes, not just women, both women and men. So the tendency is when someone makes a mistake, they hide it. And then that leads to a bigger crisis because you're not able to resolve the problem. A productive mistake acknowledges that as humans, we can't be perfect and that sometimes we will make mistakes. But a leader who believes in a productive mistake makes sure that he creates this environment wherein if you make a mistake, you are not immediately judged as a bad person for doing so. Rather, the leader processes it with you, helps you realize, okay, why did you make that mistake? And then uses that mistake as an opportunity for feedback, as an opportunity for learning. So using that mistake, asking that person, okay, what can we learn from this? Of course, this does not mean that leaders should create these companies wherein no one is punished for their mistakes, right? That's not what I mean. That's what policies are for. And we have to have clear policies to make sure that people know that mistakes have consequences. What productive mistakes, a culture that promotes productive mistakes does is that you don't just stop with a mistake or you don't stop with the punishment or the consequence. What you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that you invest also in time to debrief about the mistake, not just with that person who committed it, but in the organization as a whole, so that everyone can learn from it, right? I think in life, if you look at our individual lives, we learn a lot from the mistakes that we had. So using that approach at work will make sure that certain mistakes are not repeated again, and those mistakes are not wasted opportunities for learning.
Talking about leadership skills, so what is micromanager and how does it affect an organization or workplace?
So I always love, I love it when I get to talk about micromanagement, especially when I do trainings, because it's really something that a lot of people tend to experience, right? So a micromanager is someone who tries to do everything for the members of his or her organization. So the reason why you have a leader is because you have a team. And the reason why you have a team is because you recognize that a leader can't do everything, right? But a micromanager is someone who really feels that, I guess it stems also from a lack of trust, or it stems from the desire to control, wherein you feel that it's either your way or the highway, meaning there's only one way of doing things right, which is obviously not the case, right, in the work environment. So a micromanager, because of this desire to have control, lack of trust in his or her employees, instead of letting the employees do their work and to figure out answers or to have their own strategies, the micromanager does everything for them. And if they deviate from the ideas of a micromanager, the micromanager gets mad and feels that the project is a failure, even if you achieve the same outcomes anyway. This is a very difficult, or this is a very ineffective way to lead. The first reason simply being it's too tiring, right? If you're a manager and you're doing everything else, why have a team if you're just gonna do everything else? But second, you have to realize that as a leader, your job is to create opportunities for growth of your team members, right? Your leader is using your capacities to ensure that other people can also eventually lead. And a micromanager cripples its team members. It cripples them because you're depriving them of opportunities to be creative problem solvers. You're depriving them of opportunities to innovate and to develop solutions on their own. And it's also honestly very demoralizing. If you are someone who's reporting to a team manager, you're obsessed with getting the answer correctly, right? Because since there's only one right answer, it's very emotionally tasking, mentally tiring for you because you're never sure if you're on the right path.
And you spent 2 days with women in Ha during the Women Leadership Workshop. So what was your personal observations about women?
I think there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of sincere desire to lead and to make a bigger difference in Bhutan. I do feel that for many of them, they feel that they can't make much difference because the system is working against them. And what do I mean by that? Since I think Bhutanese women are conditioned to be, meek, very respectful and polite, which are very important values. Being assertive is immediately seen as going against how a woman should act, right? Being assertive, being a go-getter, could be interpreted as being bossy or too aggressive, which is not. I do feel very much inspired listening to their stories because the workshop's focus is for me to give the concepts and for them, for the women to really try to see how it applies to them. And a lot of them talked about what they can personally do to change the existing mindsets in their companies. Since many of them are not necessarily in the top leadership positions, so there's only so much they can do. But they all said that what they can do is help create this culture to focus more on a growth mindset perspective. And it starts by, for example, not putting other women down, supporting other women when they're succeeding, not gossiping, right? Or refraining yourself from gossiping because that's not helping the culture. It's about encouraging their fellow women and their fellow colleagues to also pursue a growth mindset, sharing everything that they learned. I hope that collectively that these things will create ripples of change in the organization. I hope that, actually, to be honest, I wish that there were also some men in attendance in those workshops so that they could hear some of the challenges that the women are going through. But I do have a lot of faith that these women have such strong conviction, they're very passionate, and they'll be able to start introducing those little things that'll make it easier for them to take up senior leadership positions in the future, as well as for their daughters and granddaughters not to experience anymore these kinds of difficulties.
You also mentioned value-based leadership. So how do you define a value-based leader in simple words?
A lot of leaders or a lot of people feel that in order to be a good leader, it's determined by what you have or by what you do. What do you mean by that? You can only be a good leader once you have an MBA or a master's degree, or you can only be a good leader if you come from a prominent family, right? Like you can be a good political leader if you come from a prominent family because that gives you a sort of access to knowledge and experience that someone who did not have the same background would have. Values-based leadership is actually just telling us that in order to be a good leader, you need to ask yourself, what do you really stand for? Okay? Because being a good leader is not defined by what you have, not necessarily defined by the credentials that you have, but actually the values that you stand for. Our values give us clarity. When you're a leader, you're exposed to many difficult circumstances. And by being strong in those values, then that will give you clarity in terms of how you want to move forward. I also want to clarify something. A lot of people define leadership as, just being the head of a company, being part of government, etc. But being a leader is actually just embracing the kind of influence you have. And anybody can be a leader. Everybody is a leader because everybody has a sphere of influence. And the kind of leader you are determines the kind of change that you can create. And the kind of change that you can create is dependent on the kind of values that you have. So if you're a leader who stands for integrity, justice, kindness, compassion, then that's also the kind of world that you will create. However, if those are things that those are not things that are important to you, then you can also imagine the kind of change you'll bring to the world.
As a young leader and achiever yourself, what would be your advice for aspiring leaders in Bhutan, especially women?
Again, the discussion on values, I think everybody needs to really reflect on the values they stand for. What do they want to be remembered for, right? And what do they think what are the kind of values that they think would really help create change? But at the same time, what are the kind of values that they want to pass on to others? What are the values that they want to be remembered for? When someone meets them for the first time, how do they want to make those people feel? I think it starts with that reflection. Like for me, I knew from the very beginning that I do want to stand for social justice. That's one of the values I uphold. Because again, I experience what it's like for my own education to be threatened. And I just feel that it's unfair that in our world, education, a good education, is a privilege and a luxury when it should be a basic right. And so that determined the kind of decisions that I made and the kind of projects that I pursued. The second advice I would give after really reflecting on the values that you stand for would be try to ask yourself also, what are the things that you need to confront? What are the things that are holding you back in order to really make a genuine difference? A lot of young women, again, are suffering from this idea that they're not good enough. They have a low sense of self-worth. So I feel that in order to be an effective leader, they first need to overcome those narratives. And it starts by really acknowledging, where does this feeling of not being enough, where does this show up in my life? And how does this affect the kind of work that I do? How does this affect my interaction with other people? How does this affect the way I view other opportunities? And lastly, resilience is very important. Grit and resilience are keys to success. Because of social media, people want instant success, right? They always feel that everything will just be automatic, or if you can't post about it, then it's not worth pursuing. Let me tell you that being a leader is not fun, in the sense that there are just so many challenges that you're constantly overcoming. And even if there are good bits that I can post on social media, just like this interview, most of it is really plain hard work. And resilience and grit are important because people need to understand that success doesn't come overnight. If your success came overnight, then the foundations of those success is flimsy, right? So it's important for people to really persevere through the challenges, and then just keep in mind that these challenges were put there to strengthen you. These challenges were put there so that you can learn from it and grow from it. These challenges were put there so that they can be a strong foundation for your success, so that when it's your turn to really be making a difference, then you have something solid to stand on, right? Every moment is character building. Every moment is not a highlight, but every moment is character building.
Lynn, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
And sharing your insight with us. And we hope you visit Bhutan again and inspire our aspiring leaders.
Thank you so much.